Chapter 18. Now what? Hunter said, looking at Haley. She gazed at him, smiling broadly, the dimples in her cheeks cutting a deep impression on both sides of her flawless fresh skin. Now you take me home to your mother and introduce me, and we get married. Please don't start that again. Did you hear what your father said? I'm your guardian, and you should listen to me. Yes, sir. She sat at attention. Head up, back straight. What should I call you? You can refer to me as Hunter for the moment. I'll decide if you should call me Mr. Samsa. That sounds great. And you can call me Mrs. Samsa, she said with a chuckle. That's my mother's name, and I don't think she would appreciate you taking her name. You're just a child? I won't be for long. I've had my period for a few years. I don't want to hear about such things. Hunter's face flushed. Boy, you are squeamish about things like that. It's nature, Hunter. She leaned over, peeping at him, trying to figure out how to make him more uncomfortable. Haley enjoyed making Hunter uneasy. He cleared his throat and sucked in a breath. My father is a doctor, and he gave me a good education. He taught me about the birds and bees. Hunter did everything to keep from rolling his eyes at Haley. She had him acting like a juvenile. I can come down to your level if you'd rather I speak like an uninformed child. You are uninformed. And you are a child. Hunter glanced at her with a raised eyebrow. Ask me anything. I bet I can answer your question. Haley offered him a wide smile. Where are we now? Hunter asked. You do know that this car has GPS. She hit a button, then pointed. Hunter's eyes left the road for a few seconds. This is where we are. Now where are we going? Haley asked. Here. Hunter's long fingers pointed to Nevada on the map. Wow. That's about 2,500 miles. I like that. I can be with you all alone. Just think, you might fall in love with me along the way. There is no way that will happen. There are places for grown men who fall in love with young girls, and I'm not eager to find out where they put these men and where they're located. What I'm saying is you can fall in love with me in a spiritual sense. I'm in love with you that way. I'm planning on being a virgin when we get married. I'm not interested in having sex with you now. Hunter's eyes shot to Haley, and he narrowed his gaze with a tight frown. Here you go again with that. If I have to hear that for 1,000 miles, I might drop you on the side of the road and let you hitchhike back home. Haley looked at him. There was no way she would believe he would do such a thing. Her head dallied side to side, and she smiled at him. You don't scare me, Haley said with a wide, closed grin. That wasn't my intentions, but if it was, you would be afraid. He turned to her, meeting her gaze, and she saw his eyes turn deep dark blue and his eyebrow lifted. She was sure he had a kind heart, and he liked women and girls. She could tell. Her father could tell. He never would have let her go with Hunter if he thought she was in danger. She fell asleep for a time and then woke because her stomach made a loud growling noise. With her hands crossed, trying to lessen the sound of her stomach, and with a pained look, she said, When are you going to stop for food and a restroom break? I'm not. Yes, you are. Look. She pointed to the right. There's a place that sells hamburgers. He slowed the car and pulled into the parking area. There were 3 cars out front. Why do you say those things to me when you know that you don't mean it? Hunter didn't answer. He drove around to place the order. What do you want? Hunter barked. A hamburger, milkshake, and fries. When the girl at the drive-thru window asked him, he repeated the order to her. They drove around, and then he remembered that he didn't have any money. What? I don't have any money to pay for your hamburger. Haley reached in her purse and brought out a $10 bill. That's all I need is a man who doesn't have money. I might reconsider marrying you. She twisted her mouth to the side and handed him the $10. I wish you would stop thinking and saying you're going to marry me, because I don't think I can survive your puppy love. When the order was ready, he handed the girl the money, took the paper tray, handed it to Haley, and drove off after getting his change. Park over there, Hunter. Haley directed him to park at the entrance. Hunter gazed at her. I have to go to the restroom. You do know what that is. Haley jumped out when the car came to a stop. She sauntered into the building. He watched her walk to the counter, ask for the bathroom key, and disappear into the bathroom. Hunter saw when one boy followed her, but saw him enter the men's room. Hunter hesitated, deciding not to go after him. Then Haley came out, walked to the counter, and the boy stood on the side of her. She laughed and the boy smiled at her. Hunter jumped out of the car and strode up to the boy. This is my daughter. She doesn't date. Hunter took her by the arm and led her out. The boy observed them argue, and Haley pulled her arm away from Hunter. He opened the car door and placed her in the car and slammed the door. Then he put his feet on the brake and hit the keyless start button. Then the car roared out of the parking lot, heading for the interstate. What was that? Haley said in defiance. I made your father a promise that I would take care of you. I'm your guardian. Well, then you will have to come up with a better excuse than I'm her father. Did you hear yourself? You sound like a kidnapper or something. And I don't like you interrupting my conversations. He was just a boy who said I was pretty, and he wanted to know my name. You can't trust boys around here. You will have plenty of time to date, but not at 15 or 16. Says who? Me. And who are you? Haley furrowed her brow and narrowed her eyes. She wanted him to answer her. She wanted him to say her future husband, but he wouldn't under any circumstances. He wasn't about to play Haley's silly childish games. Now eat your food. It's probably cold. When are you going to eat? I don't need to, Hunter said. He didn't tell her that at peak shape, and when he had consumed large amounts of fresh meat, he could go as long as 12 days, and maybe more, but he needed water. As they drove further along the interstate, he heard the sound of a waterfall. We can stop, and you can eat. Have you seen a waterfall? Wow, that would be awesome. No, I've never seen one. It can be like a picnic, Haley said with glee, her voice childlike. Hunter glanced over at Haley. She was nothing but a child, trying to pretend that she was all grown up. When did you start to act like an adult? You should enjoy your youth. Soon you will be all grown up and I will marry you, Haley said to him. Don't start that again. I wanted to say that life isn't that easy when you're an adult. It's not that easy when you're a child either. I had to take care of my father when my mother died. I think I was about 13 when he stopped eating and sleeping. That's a long story, and I don't want to talk about it now. My father is okay. I don't ever want to lose him and you. Haley glanced over to Hunter. He turned his head away from her. He didn't want her to see the truth in his eyes, that she might never see her father again. The waterfall is over to the right. Straight ahead. He pointed and pulled off the highway onto a dirt path. Coming to a stop in front of a large waterfall, they sat in the car looking at it. The water is crystal clear, and it feeds into a small lake. How did you know it was here? Have you been here before? No. You ask too many questions. Now get out of the car and be careful. He walked around and opened the door for her. You are a gentleman when you aren't trying to be my father. Hunter's eyes settled on Haley for a moment, and then he lay down on his stomach by the lake and began drinking. Haley stood looking down at him. He was so thirsty he forgot how he was drinking. He was lapping it into his mouth. You are a real caveman, aren't you? Drinking water from a spring. Not even putting it in your hands. Aren't you afraid? Afraid of what? Germs. Contamination. No, he said, looking up at her with his eyebrows making a V in his forehead. You look so handsome when you're angry, she said, sitting near him with her cold hamburger and watery drink. Hunter sat up quickly. Finish your food so we can go. Biting a piece of the hamburger and drinking her Sprite, she looked on him and said, I want to enjoy this day. It's just me and you. When we get to your ranch, it will be a lot of people, and I probably won't get to see you. That's because I will have a lot of catching up to do with my girlfriend. You say you have a girlfriend, and you haven't seen her in, let me guess, maybe 2 years. How do you know you have a girlfriend? Hunter glanced at Haley, his brow furrowed. He didn't want to think of Katy not waiting for him. He was in love, and she was his first love, and she would be his mate for life. He saw no reason why it wouldn't be as he had envisioned. He had been through too much to get home, and to think that she wouldn't be there waiting. That could prove to be too painful. I don't want to discuss her with you. Why? Do you think discussing her with the future Mrs. Samsa is kind of weird? No. The only thing that's weird is you. Let's go. He stood, walking in the direction of the car, and Haley trotted along after him. Hunter's thoughts were about sleeping in his own bed. He thought most of all about Katy, taking her in his arms and making love to her. This time he would buy a ring, ask her out on a date to a fancy restaurant in Samsaville, and then ask her to marry him. He thought about calling as he got closer to home. Do you have a cell phone, Haley? No. My father said I didn't need one. We were too far to get any good reception anyway. He had thought of surprising them. His mother would be surprised, he thought. It was good he didn't call, he rationalized. Hunter drove all night into the next day, only resting for a few minutes at the roadside parks, listening to Haley complain before falling asleep. When Haley awoke, she said, Can't we stop and sit and eat like human beings? I need to change my clothes if I'm going to meet your mother. I have to make a good impression, considering. Hunter glanced at Haley. Her words were less amusing as he came closer to home. You can't keep talking about marrying me. I've had enough. I wouldn't marry you under any circumstances. You are not my type, he barked. And what type is that? I bet you only had one woman in your life. The way you talk about Katy, she has you under some kind of spell, but don't worry, I'll break that spell. A mischievous grin crossed Haley's lips. Her tongue brushed over her lips, and Hunter caught sight of her exciting, sexy young mouth. I can't wait to get out of this car with you. That's why I haven't stopped. I think you have managed to solidify my dislike of teenagers, Hunter complained. Remember you were one once a long time ago, Haley said. She touched his hand. Can we stop now? I have to go. Hunter gave in to Haley's wishes and pulled up to the nearest gas station. He stopped the car, and then he remembered that he didn't have any money for gas, and he had to ask Haley for more money. We need gas and I don't. I know. You don't have any money. I've been buying gas and financing this trip. I don't know if I can keep supporting you. I guess I will have to turn over my father's bank account to you. He put it in your name as the fiduciary. She smiled and handed him 2 20s to fill up the gas tank. He remembered that Dr. Redmond had mentioned giving him money to take care of Haley, but he'd forgotten about that. He didn't want to have anything to do with looking after her, or her money. Grabbing her backpack and throwing it over one shoulder, Haley hopped out of the car and shot Hunter a smile, raised her head high and her shoulders back, and strutted away. He stood at the pump looking at her as she sauntered to the bathroom. "She is certainly a handful," Hunter admitted, as he proceeded to take the gas hose and pump the gas into the car's tank. When Haley returned, her hair was combed, and she had on a bright yellow dress, flip-flops, and her hair was flowing, no longer in a ponytail. She had even added gloss on her lips. "What are you all made up for?" Hunter questioned. "You." She opened the door, looking at Hunter with a coy smile on her face, and climbed inside the car. Hunter disappeared into the store to pay for the gas, then he ambled in the direction of the car. Haley liked his cool, confident walk. She had never seen men walk in such a manner as him, his head erect, shoulders back, long legs gliding across the concrete pavement. "He's so handsome, and that face and body is to die for," she thought. Hunter opened the car and sat in the driver's seat next to Haley. She wore a curious smile on her face. He checked the mirror and hit the keyless start button and drove out of the gas station. "I could never do better than a man like you." "You don't want a man. You should be looking at boys," Hunter stressed, speaking in a light, cynical voice. "Well, when I did, you intervened and stopped me from talking to one. I hope you don't act like that when I get my first boyfriend. I'm your guardian. Your father left me instructions, and I will keep you intact until you are at the age of consent. Then I can marry you." "Then you can date a boy," he emphasized. "That's not fair. You don't want me, and you're going to keep anyone from dating me." "That's not exactly the way it is." "That's the way I see it." "You don't count. You're a child." The snow began falling lightly, then heavily. "Are we going to keep at this pace? I think we should get a hotel room. I have some money left." Hunter glared at Haley. "Not on your life. It's just a spring storm. We get them this time of the year. We're high in the hills of Nevada now, and we're almost home. I won't stop." "What are you afraid of, me?" "Yes, you," Hunter said in a cold, edgy, nasty tone. "You must be afraid you can't resist me." Hunter threw another tiresome glance at Haley. He couldn't take any more of her silly, childish banter with him missing Katy and his family. The wipers once had been containing the snow, but it was now coming down quickly, and the wiper blades couldn't handle it. Hunter strained to see at a distance. He stopped every few feet to clear the snow from the blades, until the blades wore and flew off. Yet Hunter pushed on into the night, trying to clear the snow with his long arms and hand. Haley stared at him and complained, but he didn't listen to her. Then the inevitable happened. The car hit a snowbank, and careened off the road and turned over and over, finally stopped, and rested on the edge of a ravine. He glanced over at Haley and saw the airbag had gone off, and he couldn't tell where all the blood was coming from. He was unsure whether it was the airbags or the badly damaged car window which had caused the wounds on her head and body. Quickly unfastening his seatbelt, he tore hers from around her body, freeing her. The car began teetering and threatening to fall into the swollen, icy river. Why did she have to wear that flimsy dress, he thought. He had to get her out of the car, because it was ready to roll into the river. Hunter shifted into werewolf form, taking her and cradling her in his arms. "Do you hear me, Haley? Stay with me. Hold on to my fur." Surprisingly, she did as he said, and he was able to travel rapidly on 4 legs. Hunter had to get her to his ranch and keep her warm on the journey. Haley tightened her hands around his neck. He could feel the warmth of her breath on his fur. She was okay for now. He didn't have time to examine her for wounds or for broken bones. When he felt her hands slipping, he called out to her. "Haley, say something. Keep your eyes closed and hold on tight." Hunter blamed himself for making that wrong decision to continue driving, when he knew the storm was coming. He thought that he could make it home by nightfall, and he would be with Katy. She was all he thought about. He didn't think of the safety of a young girl who had no mother, and soon would have no father to take care of her. He had relinquished his responsibilities to Haley, because his emotions once again had controlled his decisions and actions. The blame lies with me, he thought. And he would take responsibility for his lack of judgment. Haley opened her eyes and she appeared to be delusional. Hunter. Where are you? Keep your eyes shut, Haley. I'm here. I'm so cold. He stopped to examine her. Seeing that she was fine, he scooped her up and wrapped her in his arms and began running with her through the snow. Haley relaxed as she felt the warmth of his heavy chest fur next to her. He carried her like a baby in his arms, whispering into her ear, "You'll be all right. I'm here, Haley. I'll never leave you." She smiled and grabbed onto his arms and lay her head against his chest. Because he was running on 2 legs and not 4, he ran half as fast. On 4 legs he could run 80 miles an hour, but he could only manage 40 to 50 with Haley in his arms. It was going to take him a little longer to get home. "I'm warm now, Hunter," she whispered. He heard Haley over the sounds of the forest and the silent drop of snow. "I love you, Hunter," Haley said, mumbling over and over. Hunter no longer was repulsed by her talk. He was happy that she was alive. He didn't want to lose her. He didn't want to forever have her death on his conscience, because he had been too stubborn and couldn't see or think about anyone but Katy. Haley had become his friend, somewhere between Washington State and Nevada. She had become a beautiful young girl, just searching around for someone or something that made sense and someone to love. The only person she trusted was Hunter, and he felt that she would find her mate one day, as he had. But not him. Humans were different, or were they? He knew when he met his mate. Werewolves could feel that connection, and sometimes that connection may be set through their first sexual encounters where they would want to mate for life. But why was Haley so focused on him and so unwavering about her feelings for him? Surely she didn't have the instincts that werewolves did. She was just a human female. Then he began thinking about Katy. Maybe her thoughts and desires were not as strong as his. During his rush through the forest carrying Haley, Hunter had time to think. Would Katy be waiting for him? Would Katy's feelings for Hunter be as one-sided as Haley's feelings were for him, as his feelings were for Haley? He couldn't answer that until he looked into Katy's eyes. Hunter didn't know how long he had been running. His mind kept him occupied. He saw the lights of his ranch. His family's ranch. All he needed to do was sprint another mile, and he would be standing at his door. However, Hunter began tiring, slowing down, breathing heavy, but he had to do it. His legs felt like 2 bags of cement as he ran near the frozen river and through the light snow. Hunter's magnificent body was holding up under the strain of lack of sleep and lack of food. It was his past years in the wilderness which had prepared him for this run. Forgetting everything except Haley propelled him forward. The thought of saving a life and not the taking of a life was what kept him going. The thought of his longings made life so important, made living so sweet at this moment. He'd finally realized that it was this human who gave him the joy he'd experienced on the trip, which had kept him going. Safe at his door, he shifted with Haley in his arms. He paused to catch his breath. "Are we home now, Hunter? Can I open my eyes?" "Yes. You're home and you're safe." Hunter opened the door. He stood and looked around. Nothing had changed. Then he lumbered into the living area, and he saw people he didn't recognize. They stood watching at him. A naked man holding a girl in his arms. One woman screamed, "There's a naked man in the house carrying a child, get him a blanket and call the police." "Where's Robert?" Hunter questioned the housekeeper. Her eyes opened wide and she turned away blushing. Robert's upstairs with the family. When he glanced up, he saw his mother Adrian, Drayton and Lysel standing holding on to the banister. "That's not a naked man, he's my son. My son is home, Hunter is home," Adrian shouted with pride. Robert rushed down the stairs and took Haley from Hunter's tight grip. At first he couldn't let her go, then with large trembling hands, Hunter gave her to him. From the kitchen, Devon and Katy rushed into the foyer to see Hunter covered with a blanket at the bottom of the stairs. Devon and Katy's eyes wavered back and forth with a startled glare. Their eyes wide and mouths open, unable to speak, and not knowing what to say. Adrian rushed down the stairs, grabbed Hunter, wrapping her arms around his neck. "My son. My son. You're home," she said, her voice choking and holding back the tears, her hands holding his face. She stared into his deep blue eyes, now hardened by life, but filled with tenderness and passion for his mother. "How did you know it was me?" "I've changed," Hunter whispered in Adrian's ear. A mother always knows her children. The end of Hunter's Moon Book 5. Next Moontide Book 6. Book 6, Moontide, will lead into the Hunter series, where Hunter and his brothers will strike out in search of a life outside of their mother and father's world. You will find a list of my books below, and more information on Rachel E. Raya's website. Enjoy!